Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. And today we're going to be discussing a very important topic that the media tends to miss, which is BRICS. And if you are not familiar with BRICS, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Basically wanting to take over as the world leaders and the reserve accounts in the world. And here's the problem with that. We talk a lot about college football. The SEC has, at least in the United States, we did. The SEC added Oklahoma and Texas. The ACC brought in Stanford. They also brought in University of California. And of course, we saw the Big Ten realliance. But what we're not following is BRICS. And they're adding more members, Argentina, Iran, and some of your usual suspects, which the whole goal and intention is to make them the strongest alliance in the world, putting the United States way below second place. Now, in this election, we know that Biden has moved over and brought in Kamala Harris. And so I was looking, well, are we going to discuss the issues? Is the media going to say anything about her? What's her stance on BRICS? What's her stance on inflation? What's her stance on immigration? All three things that are important. Instead, they discuss none. And they said, instead, here's the discussion. She's Black, she's Asian, and she's a woman. Those are the three metrics that we determine our leaders, which is not the correct metrics. But with that, we're going to bring in the Honorable David M. Walker, and we'll be discussing Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, and hopefully discussing some of the issues rather than I'm Black, I'm Asian, and I'm a woman, so hence you need to vote for me. But instead, I'm going to vote for David M. Walker. David, welcome to the show.
Hello. Well, I'm not on the ballot, Nick, but I appreciate your vote of confidence. As I've said many times, elective politics is not a merit and integrity-based endeavor, and I think this year is prima facie evidence for that. But in any event, let's look. You've set up what BRICS is about. Let me just kind of reinforce some of the things that I talked about in my latest book and how it relates to this. In my latest book, which is America in 2040, still a superpower, ? I talk about a smaller alliance that relates to BRICS, and that is the alliance of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and a few more countries, but those are the lead four, and obviously the first three, the most important, that are allying against U.S. and Western interest in connection with economic diplomacy, military, and cultural influence. A supplement to that is BRICS. BRICS is a larger group that includes, the big countries, but it also includes others, and it's expanding. And it's trying also to counter U.S. and Western interests, in particularly as it relates to the role of the dollar and the power of the United States as it relates to economic sanctions. There's an even larger group, and that's in the United Nations. It's called the G77. The G77 is the group of non-aligned countries, non-aligned with the major powers, which is led by India, but it includes, most, if not all, of the BRICS countries, if you will. And so what we have right now is we have several different alliances that are being formed to counter the influence of the United States, to counter the influence of the West, and in particular to try to diminish the power of the United States as being the world's leading reserve currency, which gives the United States significant advantages as it relates to borrowing cost, as it relates to trade, and as it relates to being able to impose economic sanctions. All of those things obviously are I talk about in the book, and they represent threats to our collective future, which we need to take seriously and be dealing with on a more aggressive basis than we have been. Nick, you still there?
Yeah. So the thing that got me when I was looking through this is that I get hit daily with the realignment on college football, and I don't get hit anywhere when it comes to the alignment of what's going on with Brics and the underlying undertow of the American economy and the destruction of the American dollar. Here's two groups that are going to join Brics. It looks like Argentina and Iran. Now, my concern is, it sounds to me, we have a whole list. Here's your Brics people: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Why are we friends with these countries? In other words, it's almost like they're allying against us. And why is not this more important than I'm Indian, I'm Asian, I'm Black, and I'm a woman? Why isn't this more important in terms of everybody in the United States of America, where frankly they want to underline they provide big undertow to the American dollar and America in general? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you're transitioning. Well, obviously, it is an important issue, and it's one that we need to take seriously, and it's one that ought to play a more prominent role with regard to our presidential election campaign in particular, and other election campaigns as well. I think if I transition to the presidential election campaign, my concern is too much of the campaign so far has been about the past and personalities rather than the future and policies. And we know that, this weekend, President Biden said he was not going to seek re-election. He's endorsed Kamala Harris. That doesn't guarantee her the nomination. And we'll have to see what happens between now and the actual votes on their nominee. But, you pointed out that people are talking more about personal attributes rather than what her position is on the policies. And I reinforce that election campaigns ought to be about the future, and they ought to be about the difference in policies rather than the past and personalities. Candidly, I think it would be extremely difficult for Kamala Harris to beat Donald Trump. You know that I've looked for a third option for quite some time, but it doesn't look like we're going to get a viable third option. And by viable third option, I mean a person who can win in the Electoral College, because that's all that really matters. Who wins the popular vote doesn't matter. Who wins in the Electoral College is the only thing that matters. So, so those are some initial thoughts. I'm happy to go whatever direction you want to, Nick.
Well, the direction is we're going to bring in our panel from around the world. Shaquille Latimer from Australia. We're going to bring in Sasha Starr from Canada, and from the United States of America, we're going to bring in Rick Rosner, who has his hand up, so he has a comment already.
I hate that. You had one finger that looked like it was extended more than the other one.
Right? No.
Okay, buddy.
All right. So I've poked around a little bit, and based on 5 minutes of research, Kamala Harris has no record on the issues that this show is devoted to. Social Security, Medicare, the deficit, not a strong, not a lot of experience on foreign relations. So she's a blank slate, but she'll probably, I'm guessing, mirror the policies of her boss for the past 3.5 years.
Let me touch on that for a second. You wouldn't have had to look for as long as 5 minutes if you look for accomplishments, but that's a different story. Look, here's the issue. Kamala Harris is part of the Biden administration. It's the Biden-Harris administration, and therefore she's not going to be able to separate herself from the track record of the Biden administration. The only thing that she was really ever put in charge of was the border, and obviously that's a disaster. And so she's going to have a difficult time. My personal view is, if the Democrats wanted to have a chance to win, what they would have done was that they would have picked a center-left governor, and again, they still may. They would have picked a center-left governor, from states like Kentucky or Colorado or Pennsylvania, and they would have kept Kamala Harris as the vice president, with the idea that when there's a Supreme Court position that comes up in the next administration. If it does, and if they happen to win, that she might go on to the Supreme Court. Because I think she's going to have a very difficult time to win. She's not going to be able to separate herself from the current administration's policies. And in fairness to her, neither Donald Trump nor Biden nor she, are really focusing on a lot of the major economic challenges that we face. And Trump doesn't have a credible policy with regard to how we're going to put our finances in order. He hasn't talked about how he's going to save Social Security. And those are the kinds of things that we need to be hearing about, from the candidates.
I made a comment to somebody the other day. I might have been to Kimberly,
You're breaking up, Shaquille.
could have been somebody else. And I said, if you took myself, David M. Walker, David K. Johnson.
He's in the outback, but I think he's.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Shaquille.
All right, I want to rebut. Kamala Harris, if she becomes the nominee, will be the first attractive candidate we've had since 2012, the last time Obama ran. And attractive candidates, people want to vote for them. They liked JFK, who had great hair. They liked Clinton, who had great hair. They liked Reagan, who was a movie star with great hair. She becomes the youngest candidate in the race. RFK Jr., 70 years old. She's 59. Trump is 78. I think voters are eager to vote for somebody who doesn't look like hammered shit.
Well, let me just suggest, Rick, don't bet more than you can afford to lose. And
I already lost $200 on Biden.
Oh, well, if you bet on Kamala, you're going to lose more. I can tell you that right now. Go ahead.
Along those same lines and everything, one of the things that I'm hearing from friends of mine, and yes, I have a lot of friends that are in that progressive camp and everything, is this notion, and I think we're seeing it even with the donors, that she will be able to do something that hasn't been done probably since Obama in terms of the Democratic side, even if some people would argue that there are folks that I'm hearing to mention that are on the Republican side as well, that she's going to be able to mobilize some of the millennials and Gen X and some of those that are much younger than anybody here on the panel, because Shaquille's the youngest. I'm probably one of the middle range in that early 60s period and everything. So I'm wondering, is that going to be the case? And I do agree with you about the center left, because one of the center left candidates that I'm hearing being mentioned as a VP and a strong VP is Roy Cooper, who is term limited. The other two that you mentioned would have to get rid of their office because they're in the middle of their offices in Pennsylvania and Kentucky. Roy can't run again because Roy is center left as well and is out of North Carolina and everything. So he's being put out as a vice president.
Well, Mark, let's keep in mind that when you run for president or vice president, if you have a current office, whether it be governor or whatever, you don't have to give up that office. And so Bashir just got reelected as an example in Kentucky. That's a red state. Cooper's a good example. I've heard Cooper's name mentioned too, right? My only point is, I think the Democrats would be better off to have somebody like that at the top of the ticket rather than as number two. And the reason being is, if we do get a race where people start talking about the future and start talking about policies, then Harris is not going to be able to separate herself from the Biden administration policies. And I think that's what the weakness is. We'll find out. I mean, what the polls say maybe in another week or two, we'll get a sense. But, historically, she wasn't polling appreciably better than Biden, and her popularity rating was actually worse than Biden. But we'll see. Until it's real, everything is hypothetical, and frankly, it's not even real that she's going to be the candidate yet. We haven't heard from the Obamas. We haven't heard from Nancy Pelosi. We haven't heard from Jeffries. We haven't heard from Schumer. We haven't heard from a lot of the real top leaders. We have heard from the Clintons, and we had heard from some other influential people. But, let's wait and see.
Going off the polls
Well,
this morning.
I'm here in Wilmington, Delaware, where Joe Biden's home is. Everyone is actually kind of happy that maybe he is going to just relax and chill out now. Um, I don't, I think that this is the wrong timing. I think that this should have been done sooner rather than later. But there's always a miracle in every race. You don't give up because you've fallen down. And I have seen many times where people have fallen down and won the race by more than a yard. So let's take a look. I think that if she gets out there and she starts talking policies, discussing the main issues, I think that she can handle herself against Trump in a debate better than anyone, because I just don't think she's going to let him insult her down. I don't think she's going to allow that to happen. I think that if she holds her head high and doesn't throw insults back, it will make her look a much more powerful, much more dignified, and it will probably put him in, shoot him in the foot, because he doesn't know how to start anything without insulting people. So I think that that will be the shoe-in, will be the debate, whether she will or not. I also think the Federal Reserve still holds the key. I have said this from the beginning, because I think that if they adjust the interest rates in September or October before the election, people with short-term memory are going to think that not just this administration, but the fact that it shifted a little bit made the change. And I think we need it. And it bothers me that he can sit there and announce, I'm going to do it sometime this year, but he can't do it now, when he knows it would help many, many people. So I have a problem with Powell doing that. But I believe that there is some hope. I think she needs an outstanding, somebody who can overshadow her. I like the idea of Obama coming in. I never liked Obama and some of the things that he did. I love Obama. I never liked some of the things he did. But I think that somebody who can overshadow her, who has been in the presidency, who knows the ropes and can work side by side with her, if they can work side by side, I think that that would be a shoe-in for the Democrats, is if somebody is willing to take a step down the ladder and work as a team to make this country better. And I think that it can be, because the law says he can. Clinton could even do it. It's just one of those things.
So going to the polls were mentioned. Today's polls at 538.com. Trump net disapproval 12%. Harris right there with him, net disapproval at 11.8%. Biden at 17 and change net disapproval, with a lot of people being polled saying, I really don't know enough about Harris to say whether I like her or not. So, we'll see.
Yeah, I think she's a decent debater. She did a good job taking on Biden when they debated. And so I think she'll do okay on debating. Where she's going to have a difficult time is separating herself from the administration on some of the policy, and she's going to have a difficult time when people ask her to list 3 of your accomplishments.
Well, maybe she's being groomed right now for that. I think she's got a lot of accomplishments, but I think that people are going to look at what she's going to focus in on. But I think the policies are going to be very important. I think she needs to start talking about policies more and more to emphasize that this is what she's going to support. And the strong opposition, is with the abortion. Right? She is totally.
That's her number one issue.
Right. And I think that she needs to now home in on the others. We all know where she stands there. And I believe that she needs to now home in on the others. I just think she needs a very, very much stronger than her candidate if she's going to have a vice president and not become the vice president again.
Just really quickly.
You just said something. Pardon me 1 second. You just said something. She needs a vice president who's much stronger than her. And I come back to where I started. They need somebody much stronger than her at the top of the ticket.
Well, they do.
And I think the smart move for them would be to try to get a center-left governor who's younger, all right, who doesn't have to carry the baggage of the current administration, keep her as vice president.
Yep.
And they still get access to the money.
Yep.
And I think, that's probably the best opportunity for them to win. But we'll see.
Hey, Dave, I've been shouting something over the last two shows that I actually got from you and no labels and everything. So what do you think about the idea of, if she has to get a vice president, getting somebody that is from the Republican camp? Because I've mentioned that in World Economy, and there were a number of Republicans that did not go to the RNC because they were not happy with Trump. We can go down to Liz Cheney, you can go down to Michael Pence, you can go down to a number of others. So what do you think about that idea? Because that would definitely upset the apple cart if they were to pick somebody that was Republican leaning versus center left, which is what you said earlier and everything. So what do you think of that option as well?
I don't think it's likely, Mark, because the progressives have the most energy in the Democratic Party, and I don't think the progressives would allow that. I remind you that when John McCain was the Republican candidate for president, he wanted to pick Joe Lieberman, who, by the way, I'm going to his memorial service on Wednesday. He was a great man and one of the original co-founders of No Labels. And the Republican Party wouldn't let him do it, but, if you will. And so I think, as I said, the progressives are really where the energy is in the Democratic Party right now, and I don't think they would allow that to happen.
Speaking of progressives, really quickly, and I know others got questions as well. What was your thoughts, and did you have, speaking of people that were lost and everything, did you have any dealings with Sheila Jackson Lee? No relation to me, but she was a force to be in the office, and she just recently passed as well. So I just wanted your thoughts around her.
Well, I used to live in Houston. I lived in Houston from 1978 to January of 1981, and I had some interaction with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee when she was in Congress, and she'd been in there for a number of years when I was Comptroller General, and among other things. And so, she was a strong advocate for her city, for her state. She was a force. There's no question about that. May God rest her soul.
Definitely. Just really quickly, I did find some of Harris's economic positions, and I'll throw them out there because this is from Business Insider. It said Harris is expected to tout, like you were saying, some of the headway the Biden administration has made with economic policies, including Biden's infrastructure deal and the Inflation Reduction Act, which included a cap on insulin costs. And apparently in April, she announced a nationwide economic opportunity tour to promote the administration's progress in investments toward small business, inflation, and student loan forgiveness. And she had also introduced policies to support the middle class, such as a $3,000 refundable tax credit for those making $50,000 or less a year, and a $6,000 credit to couples making $100,000 or less. And she also apparently pushed for higher corporate taxes, and it criticized President Donald Trump's tax cut. So that's what Business Insider put out.
Yeah, her agenda is basically the same as Biden's. The major difference is the issue that she was the primary spokesperson for, which will be an issue in the campaign, but it's not a top 3 issue, is abortion. That, it will be an issue. And there are some people that vote solely on that issue.
Yeah.
Shaquille?
Well, I will say this. I've spoke with a few young people, and when I was traveling up here, I enjoyed a train ride, which I highly recommend during these troubling times of what they're doing with the internet. But I met some young people who were traveling by train, and they want younger. They're tired. They even said, there's nobody worth us even going to the polls to vote for. They're okay with Kamala now. They are, I think a little more interested. There's like this little more energy that Biden has stepped down, but they've said that there's been nobody worth for them to even get up and go to the polls and vote for. And my inspiration with the young people is trying to help them learn that they are the people and they are what makes this country, and they need to get out there and make that change. So hopefully we'll see a rise in the young people getting out and voting. But David, I have to agree with you. I think if Kamala was remained as the vice president and they put a heavy hitter up there, that would be a good. She could win. Oops.
David,
I didn't touch anything. It wasn't me, folks. There
It
we
just
go.
appeared.
I didn't touch anything either.
I think what happened was another Microsoft blowout. When they do the updates, which they did earlier, then it blew out all their computer systems. So I thought that might have also happened to us because I think Microsoft runs a lot of computer systems around the world. So maybe David had a Microsoft
I
moment.
think he's back.
Yeah, I did. Are you there?
Did you have a Microsoft moment,
Yeah.
David?
Well, I think our power just went out, and so I'm back with you on my phone, which is obviously battery operated. The power's trying to come back on now.
Right.
Well, let me remind you, if you want to talk about age, J.D. Vance is 39 years old.
I know.
He's by far the youngest person in the race.
Yeah. So far. And until we have the full slate of candidates from the Democratic Party. I thought that in the polls I'm getting, I have a Pod TV LinkedIn poll going right now, and it's overwhelming really for Kamala Harris right now. Her being the number one person. This is like it's a small poll.
The Democratic nomination.
Yeah, the Democratic nomination. It's small.
Yeah,
There's only about 2,000 people that voted, and the thing is, they voted for Kamala Harris being number one, then Biden number two, and who else? It was like Clinton and Newsom were way down on the list. They were not really polling very well. So and if you look at it again, looking from a sports thing, Kamala Harris is the obvious because she's the next person up. Now, granted, she may not be the strongest person, but she's definitely the vice president and should be moved up. She's your backup quarterback. But it goes back to the Democratic Party, the way they select people based on race, sex, and those are your metrics, and certainly not competency. And so the thing is, it really turns off a lot of people that, hey, it's just like Gavin Newsom. I'm going to get somebody in this position, but it has to be a black woman. Well, what do white men think about that? Probably not very much, because it doesn't matter your competency. It matters your race and your ethnic background. And so the thing is, you end up with a situation that exists in the Democratic Party, which is a lot of incompetent people. And so when you say, David, go bring another Democrat in, they have a very lean bench, let's put it that way. So if they're going to choose someone other than Kamala, I don't see it, because I don't see their bench being very strong.
But Nick, the opposite side of that is that you have a lot of people that would argue that Kamala needs to, as a matter of fact, y'all all have kind of alluded to it, that she needs to pick a white male candidate in order to be her vice president versus the African American male and all
I
of
think
them.
No, I don't think she should pick on that at all. No, I think she's got to pick. It's just like she's got to pick somebody that will bring her electoral votes. And I know that Sasha on the earlier show was dismissing J.D. Vance. Don't just dismiss J.D. Vance because he's from Ohio and his job is to grab Ohio, a swing state. And I think Shapiro from Pennsylvania would be a good choice for her because Pennsylvania is a swing state. But when I listen to the Democratic garbage, it's always the same thing. They sell fear. Oh, Trump's going to create all these problems. They sell fear that Trump's going to.
Sorry, hang on a second. There was an assassination attempt on Trump, and much of the criticism of the Secret Service is, well, there was too many women involved. So, look, that may be fair criticism, maybe it's not, but I think it's a bit rich for the so-called Republican Party that doesn't care about gender and race and skin color and ethnicity to then start caring about it like they're doing with J.D. Vance's wife and saying, oh, look, she's Indian. I unfortunately got disconnected before. I was wanted to say something. We're going back a little bit. We're talking about Brics. We're talking about taxes, etc. I said to somebody recently, it might have been Kimberly, it might have been somebody else, And I said, if you got myself, David M. Walker, David K. Johnson, another person I won't name because it's not on the show at the moment, locked us in a room for 2 days, I reckon that we could come up with a better economic plan than what's currently coming out of Washington in any political party. And I would say the same thing. If you've got 4 doctors from different political spectrums, you'd probably come up with a better healthcare plan. This is, I think, the big problem with politics and with government. I will say with Kamala Harris, because she's got a relatively clean slate, nobody can really point at her and say that she's done anything particularly badly wrong. They can maybe talk about the border, but, she's the VP. She's not actually got the power to do anything about it. All they can really say is she's a bit clumsy when she talks. But she hasn't really come out and made any huge gaps that I can recall off the top of my head. So it might give her a chance to shine if she is actually the nominee and to actually put her own stamp on things. So I wouldn't say it's over for the Democrats yet, but I agree with David. I said on the last show, I think it's a real uphill battle. I don't think that there's much chance of the Democrats winning the presidency this time round. The big question is going to be the down ballot votes. And I tend to think that that's probably why Joe Biden stepped aside, was because of the down ballot votes. There's a very, very good chance they could lose both chambers of Congress.
Well,
I think, can I jump in for a second? I think you're right, Shaquille, but let's go back to 1968.
That's a bit before my time.
Well, all right. Well,
you weren't even born then, but go on.
you can read. Okay, I talk about a lot of things that are before my time. So
I'm J.D. Vance's age, remember?
I know you're kidding, but my point is, in 1968, you had Lyndon Johnson, who was the sitting president of the United States, and he announced, I think it was in March of that year, that he was not going to seek re-election, and in that particular year, you had several people trying to seek the nomination. So that was earlier, okay, to do it. And Robert F. Kennedy, I'm sorry, I think would have been the nominee, but he was assassinated in June of that year. In this particular case, the Democrats didn't allow competition to Biden in the primaries because Biden said he was going for re-election. And normally the sitting president, is presumed to be the nominee absent some catastrophic event or whatever. And so he didn't drop out until way too late. So, so there's really not an opportunity for a meaningful competition. That's why they're going with Kamala. That's why they're likely to go with Kamala. I think she's going to have a tough time winning. It's not impossible. But I think, Shaquille, you're right. One of the reasons that that Biden dropped out was because the potential down ballot aspect. And one of the reasons they went with Kamala is 2 reasons. One, it's late in the ball game to have a meaningful competition. And secondly, she can use the money. Any money that has been raised was raised for the Biden-Harris campaign. And to the extent that they parachute somebody in at this point, they can't use that money. And so that's another practical problem.
I tend to think that Shapiro would be a good person to have on her ticket for the reasons that were outlined before about Pennsylvania. I just want to come back to the other part of things that we were talking about, which was the Brics nations. Look, I'm very happy to be a citizen of 2 of the 5 Eyes countries and to have lived in 3 of them and spent lots of time in all 5 of them. Extended to that, the 14 Eyes, which I won't name all of them. I personally think that if we get our acts together and start focusing on building international relations again, especially strengthening the alliances that we already have, Australia should be trading significantly more with the United States and the United Kingdom, etc. I think if we continue to do that, there will be an unstoppable amount of economic force behind us. So yes, I think the Brics is something to watch out for, but I would like to see some internal focus on us making sure that we're getting stronger, not that we're only reacting to other countries that we've sanctioned getting stronger. And I think that we can do it. It just takes a little bit of leadership internationally amongst natural allies.
Well, and that's the biggest deficit we have in the U.S. is a leadership deficit. Nick, you've had your hand up, and then Mark.
Yeah. The thing I think is that Kamala Harris can win the election, but she needs better handlers. In other words, like Rick Rosner was a writer for Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel is just a delivery agent. But the team behind him makes a difference. And see, Kamala, I don't think has good handlers. Neither does the Biden administration. If they had good handlers, Kamala could win. But I believe they do not. and she will lose not because she's not a good candidate. Her handlers are bad.
Kimmel's the wrong example. Kimmel did a ton of his own work. Corolla used to make fun of how hard Kimmel would work, but it's true of some late night hosts.
Some late night hosted that way and everything. Hey, Dave, I had a question for you based on, I know Nick sometimes gets on the different groups that are out there that are lobbying in different ways and everything. There is a major issue that I'm wondering if her pick can help her with that issue, because definitely if we look at the world, there are two hotspots. There's Ukraine and there's also Israel. If she picks Josh Shapiro, she will have two Jewish supporters behind her. She'll have a Jewish vice president because Josh Shapiro is of Jewish background and her husband is Jewish as well. So I just wonder, is this Jewish vote going to be an important vote as well in your opinion? And is that maybe part of the reason to pick Josh Shapiro and all along those lines? I don't have a dog in that.
Jews are only 2% of the U.S. population. Arabs are 1% of the U.S. population, but they are located in swing states. So,
but Jewish people tend to vote with a higher frequency than the general population as a whole. And I think the most important thing you say about Shapiro is not that he's Jewish, he's in Pennsylvania.
He's in Pennsylvania.
And he's got I think he's got a 57% approval rating, which is high these days, including 42% approval among Republicans, which is
well, that's why I keep saying Roy Cooper, because I think Roy Cooper's approval rate is like 80% or something ridiculously high in North Carolina because of the way.
But he doesn't have the electoral votes. I checked it. Pennsylvania has more electoral votes than.
Well, in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is more likely to go to the Democrats if he was on the ticket than Cooper would.
But you have to look at Wisconsin and Michigan as well, and that was, I think, part of the reason why they picked J.D. Vance in Ohio. Whereas in North Carolina, again, it could swing, but the polls would indicate at the moment that North Carolina is going to vote Republican. So why not go for Pennsylvania and really make those four states a real battleground, especially as well when you're starting to see Trump make some real inroads into Minnesota.
I don't know if any of you have watched Hillbilly Elegy, which is the film. It's about the film about J.D. Vance's.
It's about J.D. Vance.
I watched it this weekend. He had a very, very, very difficult childhood.
No, he alluded to that in his speech, because I was impressed with his mother, who is definitely fought her own battles with addiction and is now going to be 10 years sober, because even I think he said that if Trump wins, he'd love to have the celebration in the White House, because I think she turns 10 years sober on January, which is when he would be coming into office. And I also loved her story. And I don't know people's thoughts around this. It was scary, yet also I understood it, because having relatives that grew up in the country, and I haven't grown up a little bit in the country myself here in North Carolina and everything. The fact that his mama, which is his grandma, had, I think it was something like 15 guns, but as she was getting older, these guns were located in various parts around the house because she wanted to be able to access them should something happen, and all along those lines. So I don't know your thoughts around that, David.
Well, if they have the 10-year celebration of her sobriety, I just hope the Secret Service finds all the hidden cocaine.
There's a risk in publishing your autobiography and then going into politics, because in an autobiography you want to share intimate details. It's what makes writing interesting. And one of the details that's popping up on Twitter now in his autobiography, Hillbilly Elegy, talks about as a kid he would have sex with the crack between two couch cushions. And so now couch cushions are trending a little bit on Twitter.
Look, it can't be any worse than Christy Nome's autobiography. Why would you say that you killed a dog? I don't think it's as bad as what people make it out to be because of where she was and she's on farmland, all the rest of it. Why would you put that in your he would have been the best man.
Anything to sell books. I've gone through this book and I have not found things like that in there.
I didn't do either one of those things.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see anything in there, David. This seems to be like
Dave, you haven't lived yet, I'm telling you.
Right,
no, Dave lives. He just not putting those out until the book after he is gone from there.
Sounds like somebody needs a new couch.
Right.
It also involved a surgical glove, so the cushions stayed clean.
Sasha got his hand up.
North of the border, Sasha.
North of the border, please.
Okay, a couple of things. Shaquille, speaking about the foreign policy of the United States, this upcoming, in quotes, Trump-Vance administration. I don't know how many of you listened to the speeches of DJ Vance and Donald Trump. I did, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. If you remember Trump, when he was talking about foreign policy of the United States, he named by names 2 politicians that are the most important for the United States. And he even spelled their names, because many Americans may not know even the spell of their names. I don't think that it's very important to know how to spell their names. But their names are Kim Jong-un and Viktor Orban. Okay?
Yeah.
That's what the focus of Trump's administration, in previous administration and hopefully not future administration. Now, let me explain to you something. Trump is transactional president. He does not have any policies, any ideas, nothing. Transaction, how to make profit. That's all what he is interested. Where are his children now these days? They are in Saudi Arabia, they are in Oman, figuring out new deals, how to build some skyscrapers or hotels or whatever else. That's where it's all about, making money. The US presidency is an instrument for Trump to make even more money. Okay? Now, the biography of J.D. Vance. I will tell you something that you will hear in official media once scrutiny of J.D. Vance will come out. First of all, already in the last couple of days, already many of his schoolmates came forward, and all they said is he was the best. At the best, was a mediocre, very mediocre student in school. He was a Marine. What, did he go in attacks with his rifles or shooting people, enemies? No, he was assistant clerk. He was correcting spelling mistakes. That's what he was doing as a Marine. Remember that. You'll find out more about it in the next couple of weeks.
He was a combat correspondent in Iraq for 6 months.
Right.
So he would type up stories about what was happening.
That's right. Venture capitalist. Well, did he start Facebook, or maybe he started Google or something like this? Absolutely not. By chance he met, he was introduced to Peter Thiel. And he, to please Thiel, he started to talk his language. You know what is the language of Peter Thiel? It's an ultra-orthodox, the Republican views, and actually a little bit beyond that. But that's not what I want to tell you. What I want to tell you is that he took under his umbrella, and Peter Thiel appointed him in one of his funds, venture funds, not hedge funds. It's venture funds, whatever they are. You know better than that. So, and once his associates, he asked Peter Thiel, so how's this young man doing? He said, nothing spectacular, making some money. Okay, so that was his venture capitalist career. From that, he jumps into politics because he understood that as a venture capitalist, he may shuffle papers there for the next 50 years. And being quite ambitious, we all know that. So he jumped into politics, and he's bringing exactly opposite what Trump needs to have any chances to win election. He should have brought somebody who can help him with women's issue, black issues, or any other stuff. He is bringing somebody who is who is in some ways even more Trumpian than Trump himself, speaking of women's issues and many others. So that was the last nail in the coffin of Republican Party nomination that Trump did himself. And by the way, even 2 days before convention, Trump was not sure who will be announced as a vice president. Peter Thiel approached him and say, J.D. Vance, here is your vice president. That's how
I think he approached his kids, did he? But I'll say this:
Son approached him, yeah.
I don't think that you want. I don't think that Trump wants somebody like, let's say, for example, Vivek Ramaswamy, because, or not that he would ever taken him, but Ron DeSantis. Why? Because they actually have a reasonable shot in 2028. They're going to outshine him over the next 4 years. He wanted somebody who's not going to outshine him. And I don't think that JD Vance would. I don't think that JD Vance, if he was the presidential nominee right now, would be able to beat anybody. So I think that's why he got that. He got somebody who's young, whose political future is ahead of him, who's going to be a Trump loyalist. That's why I think he picked him. And as I said, because he's in Ohio and he kind of needs the votes from that region of the country. But you're absolutely right. And the thing about venture capital, if I could just jump in on that, yes, I've run something similar to hedge funds in America. But if you know anything about venture capital, you know that it comes with tremendous benefits, tax write-offs, 100% write-offs, sometimes tax-free profits. You get grants, you get all sorts of different things when you're in the venture capital game. So it's actually relatively easy to raise money in the venture capital space if you've got something that's worth investing in or worth taking a risk on and you pitch it the right way. But you kind of have to know your stuff. You need to know not just finance, but you also need to know your way around tax rules, regulations, international tax regulations, etc. Very few people have that skill set.
Well, Shaquille, something you mentioned earlier, I think if Kristi Noem had not written about shooting her dog and there were circumstances there, I think there was a very good chance that she would have been the VP nominee. Yeah. Because I do agree that if it was me, I would have picked a governor rather than a senator, and in addition to that, I would have picked somebody that could, either somebody like Kristi Noem or frankly, his former rival, Nikki Haley, which he wouldn't do. But, I think that would have really energized the campaign, would have broadened the base. But we are where we are. Now we'll have to wait and see who actually gets the Democratic nomination and who that person picks for VP. And we'll know that in August.
If he wanted to have a woman, somebody who I've always liked, regardless of what political side she's on, but she happened to run in 2016, a Republican thing, Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of Hewlett Packard. Somebody like her, I thought would have been great. She's got no real dirt on her. She's pretty well respected. She's a great business woman. There's a lot of picks that he could have had. To be honest with you, I was surprised about JD Vance. Off the short list, he was the least likely one that I thought he'd go for.
He's from Ohio. That was the real reason. Because
Ohio's not a swing state anymore. I mean, there are. You've got Pennsylvania, you got Michigan, you got Wisconsin. Some people argue Minnesota may be in play. There are Midwestern states that are in play, but Ohio is pretty safe Republican based on all the polling we've seen.
Hey, Dave, just really quickly, along those same lines and everything, one of the things I'm hearing the progressives do, and they're doing something that may surprise Nick and everything, because they are literally going page by page and reading this massive document and breaking down this massive document, which is called Project 2025. How important is this Project 2025 in your mind going to be to the election? Because I'm literally going on shows, not just on our network, but on others. And I mean, they're going page by page, breaking down what they like and or don't like about it. But it does seem like it is a talking point and everything, to borrow another friend's terminology and everything. But I just wanted your take on how big is this going to be, because they do seem to be trying to dissect it.
All right, I'll give you a response, then we'll go to Sasha. Project 2025 is a Heritage Foundation think tank project. It is not a Trump-Vance campaign project. And the Democrats are trying to tie Trump-Vance to the 2025 project. It is a very conservative agenda. I haven't even read the whole thing yet. I will at some point in time. But it's a project of the Heritage Foundation.
It's a wish list.
Yeah, it's a wish list, but it's not. It's not a Trump Vance campaign. Their campaign is based more on the issues that came out of the Republican National Convention: the economy, border security, safety in the streets, international stability. I mean, I can go on, but I mean that's what they're focused on. Sasha, you've had your hand up, my friend.
Okay, thank you, Dave. First of all, in just the last thing what you just said, let me just very shortly comment on that, is that all these issues, what you just mentioned, the border control, the economy, and everything else, there is no policy that Trump Vance ticket addressed in all. He named all this, but he never explored what he is about to do. Okay, if economy is so bad now, then what would he do as a president and Vance vice president to improve economy? A, B, C, D, and so on. I never heard that. I heard both speeches, both Trump and J.D. Vance. I never heard anything in that respect. So this was, there were speeches very short on, not even short, the absence of any real policies, any real steps, what have to be made and what they are prepared to make. Actually, these speeches were, well, I don't want to criticize that, I'll do it some other time, but the Trump speech was the weakest of them all during 4 days the gathering. The Trump speech actually killed everything when he started again unscripted. He first 15, 25, 20 minutes perhaps, he was following a teleprompter and he was read everything what was there. And then he became unhinged and came on his own and started attacking his enemies and so on. So Trump remains Trump. There's nothing will be changing at all.
Let me give you several thoughts. Okay. First, I did watch the whole speech, although I recorded it. I didn't watch it live. Okay. As has been said by others, it would have been twice as good if it was half as long. Okay. I agree with you. The first 20 minutes or so was much better than the rest. He went off script, if you will.
Yes.
Secondly, he has a terrible habit of saying the best, the worst, et cetera, when the facts don't support that. When if he just actually stuck with the facts, he'd be credible and he'd be effective, all right? But he diminishes, his impact because he overstates things. I agree with you on issues like inflation and on issues like international stability. He really talked about how things were during his administration versus the current one, rather than saying what's he going to do to try to make sure things are better in the future. Okay. The one area where he did talk about specific was the border and with regard to immigration. That's one area. And there is a marked difference between the Democrats and the Republicans with regard to border security and with regard to immigration. And that is, in most polls that I've seen, the number two issue on behalf of voters. So Trump's his own worst enemy, and there's no question about that.
Oh, Dave,
they'd always say that
something about the Kamala nomination.
Yes,
it's not as simple as many of you think. Mike Johnson already said that any state, and there are a lot of them, who will have any legal means of challenging Kamala Harris nomination will do so and will take it all the way to Supreme Court. And you know what Supreme Court decision is going to be. So right now, the Kamala Harris nomination is still a big question because any Republican state, and most likely all of them, will challenge that.
Let's clarify that, Sasha.
Yes.
It doesn't just relate to Kamala Harris. It relates to anybody other than Biden. Okay. because it's a state by state issue. The states control ballot access. And the question is, has the date for changing who's going to be on the ballot passed for certain states? And my understanding is there's less than a handful of states, but some of those are swing states where they may have passed, and there'd be litigation. So we'll see. But it doesn't just relate to Kamala Harris. It relates to any candidate other than Joe Biden.
In 3 of the
They
states,
can have emergency legislative sessions there. Two things. One's a cheap shot. Dave, you say that the old saying is you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I guess now Trump can consider he doesn't. But as for Trump going off script, I think a lot of people like the fact that he goes off script. People that don't like him don't like it. People that do like him do, because it sounds like he's being sincere, which may be true, maybe not. But as far as this international thing, Sasha, I think that he obviously is talking to an American audience and trying to persuade an American audience. The problem with that, I've been saying this for many years, is that Americans tend to act like and talk like they're the ones that go into all these places on their own. They don't. They wouldn't dream of going anywhere if it wasn't for all the support they get from their international allies, not least of which is Canada. So, I think that yes, there can be some ripples and some interference in international affairs, but at the end of the day, when the allies of America don't agree with something and express that very strongly, the political apparatus of America tends to respond to that.
just to let you know, 3 of the states have already committed their folks to the electorate. I know North Carolina is one of them. I think South Carolina is another. So they've already committed theirs to Kamala, because they just did that in the last 24 to 48 hours and everything. So I do know they're...
Yeah, winning South Carolina. I've got a better chance of winning South Carolina than she does, and I'm not American.
Well, that's very true and everything. I was just saying, but there are the 3 states, and like I said, I'm pretty sure with North Carolina, South Carolina, I forgot the 3rd state, but I know that there are 3 that have already...
Let's talk about the states that everybody agrees are in play, okay? Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Those are the key states. There are other states that may be in play that historically weren't in play, one of which includes my state, Virginia, and New Hampshire. Those were counted to be in the blue column, but now they're toss-up. So we'll see. Still early. We got 4 months to go, and we don't even know who the nominees are going to be yet.
Right. We're on the 2-minute warning. Yeah, Rick, did you have something?
No.
You did? Okay.
No, sorry.
Well, since we're in the 2-minute warning, I was just going to add, and I don't know if David can respond to it that fast, but he mentioned the notion of the borders and everything, and I think that some of these things are going to be very interesting as to how they play out, because I know a number of people, even in the Latin American population and Asian populations, that are afraid of the mass deportations, because that is something also that he said that he would be looking at, is this notion of mass deportations, and some people are concerned that they might fall in that even if they are legal and everything.
Well, theoretically, those people can't vote.
Well, yeah, but in certain municipal elections, they allow them to vote, which they clearly cannot from a constitutional standpoint in a federal election. But that's assuming you have a process that has integrity with regard to ballot integrity. Bottom line is what Trump has said is that he will close the border on day 1. That's a marked difference from where it is right now. Can't get more stark than that. And secondly, that he would, over time, deport a huge number of illegal immigrants. All right, all immigrants here aren't illegal, okay? But and I guess that's a powerful issue, because, as has been said, if your first act coming into the United States is to break the law, it's a problem. I mean, my wife would said, somebody said, well, if you've got papers and you can't find your papers, we'll help you. But if you're illegal, you're illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. And
by the way, I know a lot of Hispanics that really resent the fact of how people are being able to get here and skip the line when they
because they had to go through the work of getting it. And with that, He's going to close the border. We're going to close our show, and we'll see everybody next week on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Take care.
Take care.